In this section, we're talking about circles. Let's start by talking about parts of a circle. The radius is the distance from the center of a circle to the edge. The center of the circle is where you have a point in the middle, and it's the same distance to every point on this green line. So what makes up the circle is the same distance from the point to every point here. That's what this actually is. If you have more than one, they are referred to as radii, and a chord is a segment joining 2 points on a circle. So let's look at the second picture here, and we'll see a picture of a chord. You'll see that it joins a point on the left and a point on the right of the circle. So that's chord. 2 points on a circle, and the part of the circle itself between them form an arc. So the arc here would be the green part that goes from this point to this point. A chord that passes through the center of the circle is called the diameter. Here's an example of a diameter. It is always the longest chord and passes through the center of the circle. An arc whose points that are on the circle and are at the end of the diameter is a semicircle. So we can tell here that we have a semicircle up here on the top. It's the green part whose ends are the endpoints of the diameter, or the part on the bottom whose ends are the end of the diameter. The circumference of a circle is the distance around the circle. It's the distance around. It's like perimeter for a polygon. So we're going to start talking about formulas. We can tell by looking that radius is half the length of the diameter, or the diameter is twice as long as the radius. So if we write that as formulas, we write radius equals 1/2 d and diameter equals 2r. The circumference of a circle you could write with two different formulas. 2 pi r is the formula, or pi d. We know that 2r is the same thing as d. We can tell 2r, 2 times radius, is the same thing as diameter, so we can either put 2r or d times pi for the circumference of a circle. So what is pi? Well, pi is actually relatively easy to define if you know the formula for circumference. So if we know that circumference equals pi times d, then pi must be the circumference divided by the diameter. So let's look at that mathematically. So the circumference of a circle is pi times d. If we want to figure out what pi is, we divide both sides by d to get pi by itself, and pi equals the circumference of our circle divided by the diameter. So what that's telling us is no matter what circle you have, no matter how big or small it is, if you find the circumference, the distance around it, and you divide that circumference by the diameter, the distance across it, you will get 3.141, etc., the infinite number that is pi. The circumference of a circle is the distance around the circle, as we mentioned, and the diameter is the distance across the circle. So the circumference of a circle is pi times d. For any circle, if you divide the circumference by the diameter, you will always get pi. So we can see that in a couple of examples. Now, these are rounded numbers, so our answer for pi will be slightly rounded. It won't be quite exact because pi is an infinite number. So in this example, we have the circumference 37.7 divided by the diameter 12. And we end up, when you divide 37.7 by 12, you will end up with very close to 3.14, etc. And here's another example with a smaller circle, and the same thing applies. If you divide the circumference by the diameter, you will also get approximately pi. If you're asked to find the circumference of a circle with a given radius or given diameter, it's real easy. You just plug in the number into the formula that you just learned. So in this case, circumference equals 2 pi r. We're going to use the formula 2 pi r instead of pi d since we're working with a given radius. We're going to plug in 6 for radius and just put that in our calculator. 2 times pi, use the pi key, times 6. And go ahead and round to the tenths since the directions asked you to, and you'll get 37.7 centimeters. Of course, this is an approximate answer since we're rounding. In the next example, we're given the diameter, so we're going to use the formula with d in it instead of the formula with r in it. So circumference equals pi d. It doesn't really matter which formula you use as long as you're using it correctly. So we're putting 4.8 in the place of d. If we had used 2 pi r, we would need to figure out what 4.8 is as the radius. So we would have had to divide it in half. When we multiply, we're going to round to the nearest tenths, and we get 15.1 kilometers. In the next example, we're asked to find the radius given the circumference. That's a little different. We're going to use the same formula we were using before. In this case, we're working with radius, so we're going to use circumference equals 2 pi r. But we know the circumference. We don't know the radius. So we're going to put the circumference 132 in the place of c and set it equal to 2 pi r. If you would rather work with pi d, that's fine. Just remember you're finding the diameter in that case, and so you'll have an extra step at the end. Now, for the next step, I'm going to divide both sides so that all that I have left is a radius, because I'm solving for r. So I'm going to divide by 2 pi. Now, keep in mind that pi is approximately 3, so 2 times pi is approximately 6. So it's like we're dividing both sides by 6. So what I'm going to do is put it in parentheses. If I don't put the 2 pi in parentheses, my order of operations will be incorrect. So I'm going to divide 2 pi r by 2 pi in parentheses, and that will get my radius by itself. And I'm going to do the same to the other side so that my equation stays balanced. In doing so, I get radius equals 21 inches. If you would prefer to work with pi d as your formula, then you would just divide both sides by pi to get diameter by itself. Diameter equals 42. And then to get the radius by itself, or find the radius, you would have to divide the diameter by 2, because we know that radius is half of diameter.